the web meeting on Tuesday, can I mention that you're going to come up with some plans? Have you told Nadine or anybody?
I haven't told the Alder yet. I haven't told Jill.
Can I say something, or would you rather have me be quiet? I'll be quiet if you tell me.
Quiet for this month, and we can say something next month?
Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming and grabbing a seat. Welcome to the Transportation Panel. My name is Doug Houselayden. I'm the Transportation Director for the City of New Haven, also the Acting Executive Director for our New Haven Parking Authority. As you can tell, our 4 cities today don't look all the same. And as we go through our cities, I want you to think of 4 words, because part of our discussion today will be a Q&A. The 4 things I want you to think about: governance, funding, planning, equity. Governance, funding, planning, equity. On behalf of the City of New Haven, thank you to Yale Office of Sustainability, Yale University, and the Hixon Center for Urban Ecology for having us participate in today's discussion. Cities, as we know, are going to be a large part of the answer to our global challenges. And because of that, one special thing about a city where large institutions and our highest political electeds are all eating and drinking the same water and food. So as you heard earlier, President Salave and Mayor Hart both enjoy the same restaurants, but also most importantly, both share the same watershed, both share the same storm system. And today we're going to talk through how towns and gowns can both work together on mobility systems. So we're going to go through 2 concepts with bike and ped infrastructure and 2 with mobility systems, transit systems. And first, I'd like to invite up Dr. Rob Kennedy, Senior Transportation Planner from University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Charles Camp, General Manager for Madison Metro Transit.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, both to share but also to learn. You'll hear a few of the things that I've tried to pick up just to being here for a few short hours. I'm going to start with, and I'll apologize to our transportation panel. We chatted about a lot of these numbers at dinner last night, but for the rest of you, I want to go through the number one thing I'm asked about when I talk to community leaders is what is our ridership? And there's 3 things I'd like to highlight on this chart. Number one, if you look at this time period here, that started a 25-year trend of increased ridership due in large part to aligning our services through the university campus, and also because the university started with bus pass programs, which I'll highlight later, and that contributed to a long-term trend in increased ridership. Next thing I want to point out is this trend. Across the country, transit systems are seeing a slight drop in ridership if they are bus systems our size. I believe that's related to 2 things: gasoline prices, which I hear across the country, and at least at Madison Metro, it is because our number one problem is with overcrowding on buses. And if we can't provide a seated ride on a regular basis, I think we lose rides. And what I've learned at this conference is I hadn't thought of artificially low gas prices and overcrowding and capacity issues as actually being urban sustainability issues. The third thing I'll point out, in the spirit of the competition that our mayors and community leaders pointed out, is that this ridership for systems over 200,000 is in the top 20 in the United States, behind, of course, New York, Boston, Washington, D.C., but ahead of large cities like Miami, San Diego, and Minneapolis, St. Paul. Little friendly competition. So we're proud of that record, but we do have a problem, and I've taken a team up to Minneapolis, St. Paul, because they are doing things to plan for the next 50 years, and we are a little behind and hoping to make some progress. Here is our service area overall. When I say realign, if I look at some of the routes on the periphery, we take some of these routes through campus. Perhaps 20, 30 years ago, not all of them came through campus. Most of them now we have go through there because it's such a large generator of not only faculty, but also other staff that work at the university. So Rob will talk next about that in more detail.
Hello, folks. So the next slide shows up what we've got on campus itself. These are not actually all of the routes. At any given time, we probably have 30 routes going through the campus. We have the busiest bus ridership of any other place in the city. But one of the things that we also have going on, aside from the regional buses that go all over the city and then go through the city of Madison or go through the campus, are the intra-campus buses that circulate only mainly on the campus. And those are the 80s. We have a bus, for instance, during the day that comes along every 6 minutes. It is our biggest problem that it's very crowded. It's extremely well used. The ridership is extremely high. We have other buses that plug in at night to provide safe travel services that go till 2 o'clock in the morning and provide a different route and go further out into the community for students that need to get home safely. And we also have routes that serve an area up here called Eagle Heights that's dedicated just to that. The next slide here just shows you a little bit about the boardings that we have every day in the campus area. Each one of these smaller circles like this are about 100, 120, 130 boardings per day. The bigger ones are over 1,000. So you can see that it's extremely dense. If we have any big problem with bus systems, it's probably that we have a high dwell time. The buses have to stop for quite a while to load people up and get them off. As a consequence, we've changed the way our buses are designed. We have a whole lot of buses that don't have seats in the usual fashion, but have so-called Manhattan seating so people can stand easier and move off and on the bus more easily. And then finally, I'm going to show you the slide that Mayor Soglin teased you with. This was the one that you didn't get to see that he quickly went past. This is a slide that we're very proud of. This is the University of Wisconsin right here. Sorry. And basically what this shows is the ratio between the number of parking spaces and the number of students and faculty and employees on the campus. And aside from the University of Washington in Seattle, the University of Wisconsin-Madison is the star here as far as the fewest number of parking spaces. We have, at any given time, about 75,000 people on the campus, and we have 9,000 parking spaces. So our ratio is 0.18, about as low as you can go. We don't have many space to expand to provide surface parking. In fact, all our surface parking is going away. We're right on a lake. We can't get into the lake unless we start floating something there. We can't get into the neighborhoods because we have agreements with the neighborhoods that we're not going to do that. So we can only go up, and that includes all our parking. All of our surface parking spaces are being used increasingly for buildings because that's the only way we can expand program and other services. Now, then I'll hand it back to Chuck.
So this chart shows our ridership. We do between 13 and 14 million rides a year. About half of the ridership every year comes from the University of Wisconsin. The pie chart on the left is broken down in those three major components. First, students at 22%. We have a student pass arrangement that I referenced earlier. Next, at 13% are faculty and staff. They also have a pass arrangement to get on the bus quickly and have the university pay for the fare later. And third, one of the things when Rob was talking about the Route 80s, the Route 80s collect no fares because they do 100 rides an hour, sometimes 120 when gas prices were approaching $4 a gallon. It just doesn't make sense to collect a fare each time. So they get on the bus, and I'll explain how we recover those fares in a minute later. This is just a quick summary of the nuts and bolts of our agreement. We've already mentioned the Route 80s. The campus last year paid us $1.5 million. What they do on the fares is because we don't collect fares, they calculate in what the fares would have been, and they pay us through this $1.5 million payment so that we are covered on that as well. During the peak, the Route 80s have buses running every 6 minutes. The pass arrangement is unique compared to our other large customers. We have a 4-year floating average. What that does is it's an average price based on average ridership over 4 years. It protects the university when ridership is rising dramatically, as it did 10 years ago, so that it dampens the impact on their increase in cost. And then when ridership is dropping, as it is now, it protects Metro so that our reduction in revenues from the university is controlled. Finally, the cost model is one we review about every 10 years. This is a one-line summary of what took 18 months to negotiate with all of our partners. All politics is local, and I'm telling you, when you work out a cost-sharing arrangement, that gets everybody at the table. But it really amounts to looking at your hours at a partner like UW, looking at your cost per hour, and then we share our state and federal revenues with all of our partners. And in the case of the Route 80s, we're not giving back to the UW fare revenues because the Route 80s, again, we do not collect fares. We have lots of partnerships. In the interest of time, I'll just summarize these. First, we have so many internships that help us. If I reach into my jacket and I pull out my phone, right now in Madison, you can probably catch 6 or 7 bus apps. Half of those have been designed by UW students. We've had students that have done cost analysis of environmentally friendly buses and all kinds of other projects like that. The 3 individuals here, including Rob, serve on numerous city committees that help us accomplish policy changes, budget changes, pass agreements, and the like.
Okay. So this is an example of the kind of thing that we do on a normal basis with Metro. That is, we provide the bus shelters on campus. As it says, we've got 56 bus shelters, and we're going to be adding more. We designed these ourselves. We have them made. We have them installed. We maintain them. Basically, this costs about $10,000 a piece, and that's installed. But having this makes it possible for our students to really feel that catching the bus is a good idea. They can stand out of the rain. And one of the things I'll add is that a lot of our students come from places around the state that don't have transit systems, and just getting them used to the bus is a good idea, because then when they go out into the world and they're not on the campus, hopefully they'll be interested in catching the bus. Here's another sort of thing that we've done with Madison Metro, with the city, and that is that we've actually helped them buy the first hybrid buses that the city now uses. We've been using them now for quite a while. Hybrid electric buses. These are specially painted. We use them on the campus, and the city, of course, has gone on to buy more of these buses, but we helped get this program started.
And then, as the mayor said, we're working on capacity expansion through bus rapid transit, but first we need a bus garage. When the bus rapid transit study was being done 3 or 4 years ago by a consultant, they had a final cost of $140 million. And I said, I don't see a bus garage anywhere. And the consultant said, well, you can just put the buses where your current garage is. I said, oh, no, we can't. And that added $35 to $40 million to the cost of the garage. We're planning this weekend. The mayor and I are heading back to Madison to sign a Tiger grant to build this facility to be eventually a facility for all electric buses. You'll see on here we're having a significant contribution by Madison Gas and Electric to achieve that. You'll see that there are partners that have never participated in Metro, such as Sun Prairie, a suburb, that understands I've been saying no for 3 years to them. They've wanted to buy service from us, but we have no additional peak hour capacity. Some other partners there include Epic, a large company that does healthcare records, and you'll see a little question mark by UW. So the mayor and I would like to meet with Charles and Rob after this and have a beer and talk about an expanded partnership. And with that, I think the questions are going to be handled at the end, so thank you. Oh, we have 3 minutes? We have 3 minutes.
Do 3 minutes of questions up here. So if you have them, please raise your hand and somebody will come around to you. Thank you so much. Next, we have Jeff Flynn, General Manager of UTrans, University of California, Davis, and Brian Abinat, Senior Transportation Planner for the City of Davis.
Good morning, everyone. The focus of our presentation is on our local transit system. It's called Unitrans. It's a collaboration between the city and student government at UC Davis. For those of you who are not familiar with the Davis community, being 3,000 miles away, Davis is located in the Sacramento Valley, roughly equidistant from Lake Tahoe and the San Francisco Bay Area. About 68,000 people in our community, about approximately 10 square miles arranged in a 2 by 5 mile, roughly horizontal kind of rectangle. One of the characteristics of our community, which is common in university towns, is that we are highly educated. About 2/3 of our population has a bachelor's degree or higher. Every community has their claim to fame, ours as being the bicycling capital of the United States. No offense to any other communities that make that claim, but it is us. We have the highest rate of, have the highest rate of bicycling in the nation. We're also home of the United States Bicycling Hall of Fame. We're also, both the university and the city are platinum designated bicycling communities by the League of American Bicyclists. City was the first city to achieve that designation by that organization. One of the dynamics in our town is that we are a slow growth community with a high growth university partner, so that complicates land use and housing dynamics in Davis. Focusing on the university a little bit itself, it's easy to get confused with the number of UCs and California state universities, but UC Davis is in the University of California system, which is one of 10. It's the third largest based on enrollment behind UC Berkeley and UCLA. And UC Davis is the largest in terms of land size. About 35,000 students, 24,000 staff and faculty, have a fairly low parking supply. So if you were referencing the map or the chart that was previously provided, we're like right in the middle there, so still fairly low. Like many communities, 75% of our undergraduates live off campus, so once they are done with their freshman year, they migrate to the city, and we don't have like a student enclave anywhere in town. They're all spread throughout the community. And Davis is widely recognized as a top 10 public research university in America. This is where I turn it over to Jeff to give you some more specifics on transportation to and from campus and more details on the Unitrans system itself.
Thanks, Brian. So how do all these people get to UC Davis? So UC Davis is the primary employer, obviously, in the city of Davis. If you look at the student population, overwhelmingly, 50% almost take a bike to get to campus every day, which is great. And then on bus, Unitrans, the system that I run and operate with the students, we carry about a quarter. If you look at the people who live off campus, which after your freshman year, you're kicked off campus, about a third of people actually, the undergrads who live off campus, take Unitrans on a day-to-day basis. For the staff and faculty, we do, Unitrans does a very small share. We only care about 4% of the people going to work every day, and we really need to work on that drive alone, which over 50% currently drive alone to campus, but still over a quarter does take their bike, which is great. So more about where I work. So Unitrans, it's a scrappy little system, more scrappy than Madison. About 50 buses in total. It's our 50th anniversary year next year, so we're really excited about that. We started with 2 authentic London double decks. You can see those up there. And we still operate those today. So it's kind of cool. You drive on the wrong side of the road. When I was a student, I drove one of those there. Ridership really started to take off in 1989 when we started to, when the students voted to tax themselves. So the student body said, gee, we need to take advantage of this great bus service and expand it, so let's tax ourselves. And as a result, they tax themselves at $11 a month during the academic year, and they get fare-free service on Unitrans. And as a result, 90% of our riders are undergrads for UC Davis. Here's our system. That's 18 routes, and as you can see, that is the entire city of Davis. So we do have a really broad coverage. And you can see this map, which isn't very beautiful, but almost the entire city is within a quarter mile of a bus stop. A quarter mile is the general rule of thumb that people are willing to walk a quarter mile to get to a bus stop to use it. And because, as Brian said, we have a student population that's distributed throughout the city, it's important to have good coverage everywhere. Unitrans by the numbers. I can't say that we're first. We're not the great. Well, we are the greatest, but we do have the 3rd highest passengers per hour in the state of California. So if you look at systems in California, you have Muni in San Francisco, my former employer, which has the highest passengers per hour. then you have LA Metro, and then you have scrappy little Unitrans. So it's great that we have a system that's really well utilized, and like Chuck was saying, it means that we leave a lot of people behind. We have an overcrowding problem overall. We're also the lowest cost carrier in the state of California. We cost about $65 per revenue hour to operate, and our peer in the county, YOLO Bus, is almost double that. So we really are very cost effective. 4 million annual riders, and our model is all interns. So we have 92% of our staff is students. So how are we funded? As you can see, the biggest chunk of the pie in that blue color is student fees. So the students tax themselves every month. They get fare-free service, and they pay for half of our budget. And then it's really the city partnership that kicks in with us. So the city passes through their state and federal funding to us to operate the system for them. And then that little teeny chunk of the pie, 6% is passenger fares. So here's like where it really kicks in. What is the advantage of Unitrans in our system? We're not unique in the nation, but we are one of the largest student-run bus companies in America. And it has some really key benefits. So we take the money that the city gets, and then we add the student fees, and the students essentially match and double our budget. And then we have this workforce of entirely interns. So all of our drivers are 18-year-olds, all of our supervisors are 18-year-olds, and most of our managers are 18 to 22-year-olds. So 200 people, 250 people. There's 8 adults, or real adults. But it gives you 4 times the service, which is the great thing about Unitrans. A city the size of Davis would only have a quarter of the service it would have if it wasn't for the students and the partnership that we have between the city and the university.
And believe it or not, it actually works having 18-year-olds drive buses. So Unitrans has an interesting sort of governance and relationship structure with the city. The reason why it works is because of the collaborative spirit and the relationships that we all have with each other at the staff level. We all really enjoy actually working together and trying to solve problems so that we can better serve our community. But from a more formal standpoint, Unitrans reports quarterly to their own student government and also to a city advisory committee, which is called the Unitrans Advisory Committee, which consists of city council liaisons, city staff, several representatives from student government. We have representatives from our mobility challenge community, as well as several city commissions, and then a few members at large. That group meets quarterly as well. And Jeff already mentioned that the city passes through our FTA funding to Unitrans. And we work on a lot of projects together. Some of the primary things that we work on are ensuring that our mobility challenge community can access the buses through ADA infrastructure improvements, those types of things, facilities and maintenance such as bus stops, bus shelters. We coordinate closely on that. Our paratransit service in Davis is run and operated by the city, and so together we coordinate our short-range transit plan together to make sure that our system is functioning the way that our community needs it to. We work on corridor plans together. Whenever we're looking at redesigning a street, we're closely engaged working on those together. Whenever there's a construction project, we're communicating very closely to do that. One of the more recent projects that we've worked on together, which is called our annual travel training workshop, that's targeted towards seniors and disabled, where we bring them into kind of a forum like this, where we give them a training session in class, and then we go out in the field, and they get to experience it in a casual, low risk, low stress environment where they actually get on the buses and experiment with that. We also work on grant applications together. Fare-free transit was one that we recently applied for, and we were recently awarded a project funding to work on trying to get better access via transportation networking companies like Uber and Lyft to get access to our train station due to our limited parking supply at that train station. From a sustainability standpoint, the city has a carbon neutrality goal by 2050, which also includes the transportation sector. So that means we're going to have to drive down our vehicle miles traveled. Our transportation element of our general plan also has a mode share objective of 10% transit, 10% walking, and 30% bicycling by 2035. So Unitrans helps us to achieve those goals by really enabling car-free lifestyles in our community. So it really is, it is really possible to live in Davis without needing to own or bring a car with you to campus or to live in town. Some of the upcoming challenges, since I'm already up here, I'll do the last two bullets that we have, which is the big one is our kind of expanding university population and sort of our slow growth community. That's going to create challenges. Unitrans and the city are going to need to work together to figure out how we can accommodate that forthcoming transportation need. So I'll turn it over to Jeff to wrap it up.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. I know we're a bit over. So our biggest challenge is budgetary right now. So in the state of California, we're going to $15 minimum wage within the next 5 years, having a part-time student workforce. That with that low-cost model, we pay near minimum wage. So we have to start increasing our wages $1 per year right now, and we just don't have any way to pay for that right now. The students last taxed themselves an increase in 2007. They've said the buck stops here. So our federal and state funding goes up with inflation, 3% a year. Our student fee is flat. The spending power, that's going down. And now our expenses are going to be going up 20%. So we have a big existential crisis in front of us on how we're going to pay for that. Thank you. Should I call on people? Sorry. In the back, ma'am.
Thank you for coming over, and I just want to acknowledge that I'm personally saddened by the smoke in your eyes at home these days.
Oh, yes, thank you.
I'm just curious, do you have bike sharing and car sharing as part of your transportation infrastructure supplementing your transit?
We do. We have Zipcar now. We currently have like 13 vehicles in town. We're continuously looking to expand the Zipcar system. The campus has probably twice that amount, so there's lots of Zipcar in town. We're bringing bike share in the spring. We're part of a regional partnership with City of Sacramento, City of West Sacramento, and that should be coming in the spring. They've done a pilot phase or an early launch, and so there's about 100 bikes in Sacramento. West Sacramento right now. We'll be getting ours in the spring.
Made that easy right next door. My question is about, you said a lot of people who are staff at the university, although a quarter of them are biking, quite a lot of them are single ride. And I did a lot of work in Sacramento previously, and there's a lot of suburbs out in the Sacramento area. So I'm wondering, where do all these people that are working at Davis live? Are they living in Davis? Are they living in the Sacramento suburbs? Are they living somewhere up and down the interstate? How hard would it be to get those people onto public transit? Are they really all sprawled out?
That's a big challenge that the university is going to be looking at with their long-range development plan. There is sort of an outward migration from city residents who work at the Capitol, or because the housing is getting more expensive, people are commuting to the Bay Area as well. But the university is going to have to try to look at how they're going to accommodate some of this additional growth and get them onto campus, because they want to do that in sort of a carbon neutral framework to accommodate their growth. So yeah, there's folks that live in Woodland and come to and commute to the campus because, again, the housing is expensive and it's limited. So we do think there are definitely opportunities to do that. We just need to coordinate a little bit more to make that happen.
One last one. One more. Yep.
Oh, actually, her question was so
Let's join me in thanking our panelists. Next, I'd like to welcome the City of Minneapolis, and specifically Steve Sanders, the Alternative Transportation Manager for University of Minnesota, and Simon Blensky, Planner, Transportation Planning and Programming Division, City of Minneapolis. Come on.
Thank you. We're going to talk kind of broadly about some collaboration between the city and the university around bike projects. We're going to specifically focus on one called the Dinkytown Greenway. But just, again, keep track of who's who. I'm here with Steve, the university, and I'm Simon with the city of Minneapolis. Just a snapshot of the two worlds that we work in. The city of Minneapolis has a population of about 400,000 people. We have our neighbor to the east, the city of St. Paul, that makes up the Twin Cities. We're within about 3.5 million populated metro area, that's 7 counties. As far as walking and transit, we have kind of moderate levels in Minneapolis, but we're proud to have one of the highest bike commute mode shares in the country for large cities. Current mayor is Mayor Betsy Hodges, and we have 13 council members that represent 13 wards in the city. As with many places, we're always working with partners. Rarely do we get to work on a project that is just on a city street or just involved with the city, so at the county level, at the state level, and of course at the university. I work in our public works department. We don't have a separate DOT. Our transportation staff are within public works. There's 4 transportation-related divisions. I'm within our transportation planning division. And we're really fortunate, at least currently, to work in an environment with a lot of strong local support for walking and biking in Minneapolis. And this is reflected in city budgets as well, which is also helpful. But we are still very active in pursuing outside funding to support a lot of our efforts, including federal funding.
And I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the university campus. For those unfamiliar with the university, we're immediately adjacent to downtown Minneapolis, and the main campus in Minneapolis is bisected by the Mississippi River. So we have a campus on either side of the river, and then we also have a campus over in St. Paul. And the campus in St. Paul is primarily animal husbandry, vet science, experimental agriculture fields. And the 2 campuses are connected by a transit way, a bus and bike only, 3.5-mile bus and bike only transit way. And some of our demographics, the campus, Minneapolis campus is 360 acres, St. Paul 540. We have 265 buildings on the University of Minnesota campus, 46 miles of streets or sidewalks and plazas, and then 16 miles of streets that the university owns. There's many streets that different jurisdictions own. We'll get into this a little later. There's Park Board owns streets that go through the campus, the counties own streets, the city owns streets, so there's a lot of overlapping jurisdictions. And we share borders with the city of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Roseville, Falcon Heights, Lauderdale, and both Hennepin and Ramsey County. And we have applied for and received federal transportation grants with almost everybody up there, with the exception of Hennepin and Ramsey County. So we work closely with our neighbors and try to get federal transportation money. We have 31,000 undergraduate students, 17,000 in our grad school. There's about 17,000 staff and faculty. We also operate a transit service that gets people between the 2 campuses and around campus, and that carries about 3.5 million people a year. We have 19,000 car parking spaces and 10,000 bike parking spaces, and all the money that supports sustainable transportation comes from parking fees. So we are entirely self-sustaining. We get no central funding. And we have we have $41 million that we collect from parking fee. There's no free parking on campus at all. And campus is the busiest. It's kind of the nexus for biking in the city of Minneapolis. We have more bikes there than any place in the city. Most of the streets around campus see at least 1,000 bikes a day, and some of the busier streets will see upwards of 4,000 bikes a day. The main bridge across the river that connects the East and the West Bank campus will see 7,000 bikes a day across that bridge. And Simon will take over there.
And like many university campuses, it's the place for biking in the city. So that high demand over the years has really led to innovation. Some of our first on-street bike lanes were installed in the 1970s with a focus around campus. I love the whiteout on that map. More recently, we've tried new things. We've been taking risks in this high-demand area. We've installed green bike lanes at some high-demand intersections leading into campus. We've installed one of our first bike signals at one of the main entry points into campus. And with the proliferation of protected or separated bike lanes, we've been focusing around the campus area with those facilities, with one of our first protected bikeways going in on Oak Street, which borders the East Bank campus. The collaboration that occurs around biking between the city and the university really occurs at the project level and at the staff level. We get a lot done at the staff level. And just a few examples of what we're working on right now. The city has a 2.5-mile protected bike lane project planned for 2019. It's all on city streets, but it basically brushes the sides of campus for much of its length. So we're working with Steve and his team on the design of the bikeway as it impacts the adjacent land uses or their bus stops as well. This is a funky little street. It's only 3 blocks long, Harvard Street. It goes through campus, but it has 3 different jurisdictions over 3 blocks. City, university, and our park board. The middle segment is owned by the university. They're going to be reconstructing that next year. So all 3 jurisdictions are just coming together at the staff level to ensure that there's a consistent design, including a consistent bikeway design for those 3 blocks. Outside of just kind of building things and collaborating on infrastructure, we have some ongoing, although kind of informal partnerships with faculty and students at the research level around biking. We've been installing a lot of bike facilities in Minneapolis, a lot of new things, not just around the university. We're really interested in understanding the effectiveness of that and how it's working. So we work with the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, the Minnesota Traffic Observatory to collect video, do some data analysis, draw conclusions to help us. And more at the policy level, the city of Minneapolis recently adopted an ordinance to increase funding, basically to replace our aging infrastructure, our hundreds of miles of streets that are reaching the end of their useful life. And in addition to picking projects going forward based on just the asset condition, we're also incorporating some equity scoring into that as well. And we're talking a lot about equity in Minneapolis, but we haven't done a lot of measurement to that yet. So we're starting a partnership with the Center for Transportation Studies on campus to really see how we can track that investment.
And I want to talk to you more, take a little deeper dive into the Dinkytown Greenway project. And to get Dinkytown out of the way, it's called Dinkytown because on the north part of campus there's heavy railroad presence and there's a lot of rail switching yards there. And a dinky is a small engine that moves around rail cars and rail yards. So that's why it's called Dinkytown. And it's it's a commercial node, now it's a commercial and residential node just north of campus. And it connects downtown on the west, and then the St. Paul campus of the university on the east, and then also points east from there to downtown St. Paul. So there's a continuous bikeway all the way from downtown St. Paul, connects to the Transitway, and then now to the Dinkytown Greenway in downtown Minneapolis. And that's a distance of like 12 miles. So, and we've been building on this thing in bits and pieces over the years. So we've been kind of taking bites from both ends, and the university built the transit. The university built the university built the Transitway in 1996. Then we built a protected bikeway here, like in 2012, and the bridge. This is called Bridge 9 over the river. That was converted into a pedestrian. It's an old abandoned railroad bridge. That was converted into a pedestrian-only bridge in the 90s. And so we've been kind of biting at it, but always this section in the middle has been kind of bedeviling us. We've applied for grant funding. It's been funded 3 different times in different programs. The university has applied jointly with the city of Minneapolis. The university has applied separately in different categories, and it's been the #1 project every single time it's been funded, but we've always had to turn the money back because we couldn't get the railroad to deal with us. And what happens is you run the risk of becoming an unreliable partner. The feds do not want you to turn money back after it's been granted because it creates a problem for them. So it's kind of the third time is the charm. This is just, I don't want to show you, these are all different iterations of this over the years. I started working on this in 1996. I think Simon was probably like in 5th grade and just dreaming about becoming a bike fed planner. And now we got to do this. That's Simon, you can take over here.
One last segment that was, on this map on the left side there, actually connects directly into downtown, and we actually had an opportunity. Some of you may recall the 35W bridge collapse in Minneapolis in 2007. That was kind of a barrier to implementing that last segment, but we made seized that opportunity, made something out of it, and actually constructed a tunnel under the new bridge in coordination with that project. So very quickly tried to mobilize to make that happen. And just to kind of paint the picture that it's taken a long time, but it's really paid off, and having a complete network really makes a difference. This is bike and pedestrian traffic on Bridge 9 over the Mississippi River. You can see it was definitely well used. You know, it did connect a little bit here and there. People were reusing it prior to making those final connections. But once we constructed that important segment on the East Bank, constructed the tunnel into downtown, ridership more than doubled very quickly. And just some photos of the final product here. This is headed into the tunnel into downtown under 35W. This is the bridge over the Mississippi River. One thing that Steve kind of mentioned, after we weren't able to work directly with the railroad, the new trail is constructed entirely on university property. So with that, there's I'll say some compromises. There's some overlapping uses where to access a loading dock at a university property, delivery or maintenance vehicles actually drive on the trail for a short segment, and it works just fine. There's some context looking into downtown, and here's the separated bikeway that the university constructed a few years back, connecting to that transit way to the St. Paul campus. I think that's all we have, but thank you very much.
Questions from the audience? Just simply raise your hand and we'll bring a mic to you.
So you've worked on both the bicycle lanes and then protected lanes and then the greenway. And the greenway's obviously taken the most amount of time. But, you know, what's your feedback on all of those different systems, given that, you know, I'm seeing a lot of cities putting money into bicycle lanes and repainting the lanes, and they're not particularly things that I want to bicycle on because they just seem unsafe. But I don't see cities really focusing on just closing roads to cars. And, you know, I know in the Midwest there's a lot more bigger roads, and it's maybe harder to do that than in New England. But you know, what's your feedback about all those different types of bicycle passages?
For many years, and we're still currently doing it, kind of the conventional bikeway design is a striped painted lane on the street. That's got a lot of people biking in Minneapolis and other cities, but really protected bike lanes that are more separated from moving traffic are really the way to go. It's the best practice. It's what they've been doing in Europe for many decades. So that's really the design we're trying to pursue, and we've got feedback from people who are kind of on the edge, probably similar to you, who are not maybe comfortable biking with just that stripe between you and moving cars, but having more separation really makes a difference. There's a lot of research around this. There's often more trade-offs because you need more space, taking away a travel lane or a parking lane, so we get a lot of negative feedback on that end of the spectrum. But overall, building that complete network that is comfortable is really important, and we're getting positive feedback on it.
Two more questions. We have one in the back.
Yeah, hi, thanks for your presentation. In terms of the data collection, and specifically with the pedestrian and bike counts, are you doing that manually, or are you using infrared sensors of some kind? I'm particularly interested in the data collection along the greenways.
Yeah, and Steve can speak to this a little too, but most of our bike ped counts in Minneapolis are still conducted manually, although we do supplement that with automated counters, and then we use that to extrapolate or kind of justify some of the shorter manual duration counts that we do. There's some great researchers at the University of Minnesota that have actually helped us, and their students have helped us refine our methodology and kind of test some of the new technologies that we're using. Happy to talk with you afterwards about some more of the specifics of that.
And we do a manual count. We just did ours last week, but we also have thousands of bikes on campus that are equipped with RFID readers, and we have RFIDs, 20 RFID readers around campus. So we collect a lot of data. Every time you ride your bike past one of these readers, you know, it date stamps that you rode your bike that day. So we've got, you know, where you live, where you came from, your affiliation to the university, your age, your gender. And then what we do is we provide health insurance discounts to employees who bike a certain number of times a year using the RFID. And what we're trying to do with the RFID readers is we're putting out counters, tube counters at the RFID readers to compare the actual counts versus the RFID counts. And if we can find a consistent ratio, I mean, it would be, you know, it would be lovely, because then we'd have like an ongoing live count. And that the jury's still out on that. That's a 2-year project.
I've heard a rumor that it gets a little chilly in Minneapolis in the wintertime. And I'm wondering if there's any accommodation that you make for that in terms of clearing snow, or just like how your numbers compare summer and winter.
Well, I will mention first that Steve does bike all winter, or almost all winter. Yeah.
All winter.
All winter, all winter. There are still a lot of people that bike. I would say on a nice winter day, we've done some counts throughout the year, and on a nice winter day, after snow's been cleared, about 1 out of 5 people continue to bike throughout the winter, even when it's cold. So still not as much during the summer, but it's been an ongoing process to make our system work throughout the year, especially with terms of snow clearance and maintenance of our facilities. Our protected bikeways are particularly, you know, challenging to plow. They just require a new process. There's a little bit of lag, but we've got additional funding for staff and equipment to make that work, and our maintenance staff are incredible, and they've designed new routes, trained staff to design these tiny little spaces really well.
At any bikeways that we have on campus, our land care department does all the snow removal, and they treat any bike facility the same as a sidewalk, and so those are the things that are done the first thing. And it drops, it's like Simon said, it drops about 80%. You know, you can predict about halfway. It drops about by 50% when you'll get a cold snap, and it will stay cold, and people kind of recognize it's not going to get over 40 anymore. And then the next big drop off is when it snows, and people recognize that the snow is not going to go away. And then we'll get the big drop off, and I think it's primarily people are concerned about icy conditions. And
Please join me in thanking our Minneapolis team. Last but certainly not least, our sister city to the east, and I remind you that the biographies of both the cities and the panelists are in this program today, and I'll tell you that Providence certainly sounds a lot like New Haven, so we're interested in learning a lot from you two. Martina Haggerty, Special Projects Director, Department of Planning and Development, City of Providence. Al Dahlberg, Assistant Vice President for Government and Community Relations from Brown University.
So for those of you who aren't as familiar with Providence as Doug, we are a historic New England city, about 180,000 people, but densely packed within just over 18 square miles of land area. We're also growing. We're expecting to add over 50,000 people to Providence in the next 8 years. We have large institutions spread out all over the city, which I'll talk about in a moment. 8 hospitals, 7 colleges or universities, including Brown. And over 35,000 college students in the city proper. So many of our institutions are spread out from downtown. Historically, they've located in areas all over the city in somewhat of an isolated nature. And a lot of what we're doing right now in the city is trying to tie those institutions back to our downtown and to one another. However, the other part of the equation there is our growing downtown. So downtown started out as sort of the financial district in an area known as Down City. And over the years, downtown has grown exponentially. So we've grown to the north in the 1970s and through the 90s. Downtown expanded to the north. We moved our railroad tracks, moved our train station, and created over 30 acres of land for redevelopment in an area that's called Capitol Center. We also uncovered our river, which was unfortunately at some point someone had the brilliant idea of putting parking over our river. Luckily, Mayor Cianci came along in the 90s and decided to uncover that river. And now it is one of the good things you can say about Mayor Cianci. But this was a plan that he championed, and now this area, Water Place Park, is really something that's nationally known. Other countries come here to learn from what we've done in this area. About 30 acres of new land was created in this Capitol Center area. You can see right here, just to the north of the downtown core. Downtown's also grown to the south, though. An area formerly known as the costume jewelry capital of the world, the Jewelry District, is now, for a while, was affectionately known as the Parking Lot District locally, and you can see why here. This is actually Rhode Island Hospital and the hospital district down here to the south of downtown, and you can see they've really eroded the fabric of the neighborhoods in that area, but a great opportunity for us to grow. And so grow we did. As if moving our railroad tracks and uncovering our river weren't quite enough for us, in the 90s we started to wrap that up and looked around to see what we do next, and we decided to move a highway. So we moved Interstate 195 here that you see in the center and shifted it a little bit further to the south. And once that highway was moved, about 20 acres of new land was opened up for redevelopment where that highway once stood, and the city streets were reconnected to connect the Jewelry District back to Down City. And it was really major public investments like the moving of that highway and the Providence River pedestrian bridge, which is now under construction, that's going on the old piers of where the highway once stood, that will connect the east side and Brown University on College Hill into downtown. But it was those investments, along with investments from institutions like Brown University, RISD, and Lifespan, that have played a critical role in laying a foundation for what has really become a renaissance for our city. We're now seeing a design economy, a life science-based economy emerging in our downtown and in other areas of our city. The investment that followed the moving of the highway in the Jewelry District has been unprecedented. But once again, this expanded our downtown south. So what was once this nice walkable quarter-mile downtown core has grown to something that's really beyond that comfortable walking distance. So looking at some transit solutions to try to reconnect that growing downtown and reconnect some of these institutions, the main concept came along for this Meds to Eds project. So back in 2006 or so, we began to look at the idea of a Providence streetcar project, a modern streetcar, to connect Brown University's College Hill campus with the main bus hub in Kennedy Plaza and to the Rhode Island Hospital area and to that growing knowledge economy that was emerging around the I-195 area. So one would think pretty simple, right? Draw a line, connect those destinations to one another, and we can call it a day. That's not quite what happened. What happened was something a bit more like this. And you can see where Brown's Medical School is right sort of in the center of that. But what happened over the years as this project was in the planning phases, we were talking to partner institutions and other key stakeholders in downtown, and everyone wanted front door service, and we had a problem saying no to that. And we wanted to please everybody. We wanted to provide great, convenient transit service that our partner institutions would use, but not really a great functional transit line. So in 2014 or so, we were awarded a $13 million US DOT Tiger grant. Despite some of the flaws of the project, we decided to move forward with it. However, the project fell apart. There were a lot of reasons. One of them was that very indirect route. We also had a large local funding gap to make up. We were planning to provide somewhat infrequent 11 to 12-minute service along this route, and there was a lack of dedicated right-of-way, so the streetcar would have been operating with mixed traffic in that downtown congested core. So we were able to work with some of our partner institutions and reimagine this project. We reallocated the funding with the help of Senator Reed to a bus-based project that would follow a similar route through our downtown and connect Providence Station to our main bus hub in Kennedy Plaza, the I-195 district, and Rhode Island Hospital in a bit of a more direct way that made sense. What we ended up with was about this 1.35 mile enhanced bus spine. What's really interesting and unique about this project is that it is not envisioned as a standalone bus project or a streetcar project. We're actually extending or rerouting 7 existing RIPTA bus routes. RIPTA is our statewide transit agency. So these bus routes will serve this downtown spine, 6 stops along this route, but they'll also extend out into neighboring communities to serve the greater area. We'll have 4 to 5 minute peak service at a minimum along this route. This project will be under construction within just the next few months. More than half of the route will initially include dedicated right-of-way, but our goal is certainly to provide dedicated right-of-way along the entire route. And we're also integrating a 400 bike share program that is going to launch this spring, all for about 1/7 of the original cost of that streetcar project. So sometimes plans change for the better, and this was certainly one of those cases.
Thanks. So I'll just give you a little bit of context about Brown's relationship with the city, because the topic here is university-municipal partnerships. And the main point I want to make is partnerships are really hard. Let's not forget that. I guess that's why we're here, right? So Brown is a very space-constrained institution. If you add up our students and our faculty and staff, we're about 14,000 in our community. We're in a very old, historic neighborhood, very densely packed. It happens to be the wealthiest neighborhood in one of the poorest cities on the East Coast. So it creates a lot of town-gown strain. And over the last few decades, when we've discussed with previous mayors partnerships, we usually get back the response, give us money. Give us money. That's all we've heard for years, decades. And in fact, now we have 2 agreements with the city, and we write a check every year of $8.2 million to the city. Again, from the 2 agreements we have, paying commercial property taxes. So we don't have a whole lot of money left to do partnerships, when we're writing that kind of a check. And frankly, previous mayors haven't been at all receptive to partnerships. The mayor we have now, Jorge Elorza, is very receptive, and he's looking at ways that we can really work together, not just Brown and the city, but the city and the other institutions, to really improve the city for everybody. So that's changed. The other thing that's really changed is Brown has now moved off College Hill, and we've moved downtown, where we have, by the end of the year, we'll have almost 1 million square feet of space downtown across the river in the jewelry district that Martina mentioned. So I just want to mention quickly, we had Sasaki in 2013 help us put together this handbook for physical planning. We wanted to make sure it was data-driven and also came up with principles for our future development. And this is the background for our movement downtown, by the way. We had a faculty survey. They responded with the degree of their collaboration among departments. And you can see what we found out was there was a lot of connectivity between our departments. And in fact, even in the courses our students are taking. That led us to decide not to put a new building for our School of Engineering downtown, but to keep it on College Hill. So we had to move something downtown, and so we looked at many different options. And this was, again, some data from that handbook for physical planning. The blue shows pedestrian traffic, the purple shows vehicular traffic, and that, again, informed our decision to move some things downtown. These are just a few of our planning principles: prioritizing academic uses on College Hill, connecting the campus, and also catalyzing partnerships. That led to our discussion we're having with the city right now on bike share. And we think this is going to be a critical part of connecting our downtown campus to our main campus. And this is, you can see the bottom left is where we now have our School of Professional Studies, laboratories for molecular medicine, our medical school, and we have a new building going up right now, which is an old 100-year-old power plant that's being retrofitted, half for the University of Rhode Island College School of Nursing. We're going to take the other half, have 425 administrative office staff in there. But that really poses some big challenges on connecting this campus. So we think bike share will be critical. We've had students for about 10 years pushing us to do bike share. And we could have done it years ago, but we have held off because we wanted to use this opportunity to partner with the city. And to this mayor's credit and the planning staff, they've seized this opportunity. They're going to launch a bike share in June. We're going to be a critical piece of that. We haven't decided how much money we're going to put in yet, but I think to succeed, we're going to have to play a big role in subsidizing that and making sure they have a critical mass of users. So that's one project we think will really pay off in the long run. We also have a campus shuttle on that green line connecting the two areas of campus. That's our own shuttle. And we also participate in the UPass program with the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority. So we have 330,000 rides a year on the public transit buses, which again, we think will only increase once the downtown transit connector gets built. So I'll stop there for any questions. Thanks.
Questions from the audience?
So I am a graduate of this institution, also a New Haven resident. So I'm curious, we have a fairly similar situation here in New Haven, wealthy institution, pockets of poverty in New Haven and the greater region. So I'm wondering if you can address the equity question a little bit more to see how some of the work you're doing is maybe improving on some of the weaknesses of the transportation system when it comes to questions of equity in Providence?
I think our downtown transit connector project is a great example of that, where we took something that was going to be sort of an exclusive shuttle for some of our institutions and for our downtown stakeholders, not impacting some of our neighborhoods that are out there that are in poverty, that are transit dependent. DTC project is reaching out fingers into those neighborhoods and improving transit service on these 7 bus routes that'll feed in to these job centers. So I think that's a great example. And another one is bike share, where we're going citywide with that system. It's not going to just serve Brown University. Like Al said, Brown could have a few years ago leaped ahead of us and done it. We said we weren't ready. They decided to wait for us graciously. And so together we're partnering on a citywide bike share system that'll impact some of these other neighborhoods that desperately need investment.
One of the interesting things about Providence, too, is the lower income neighborhoods really aren't that far from the really wealthy neighborhoods. So because of that short distance, it's really not that hard to connect them with bike share. So we've enthusiastically supported the city's efforts to locate bike stations in the further reaches of the city in some of those lower income neighborhoods. Partly, it also serves our community. We have over 500 students a year going down to tutoring programs in the city, volunteering in community organizations on the other side of the city. So if they could access bike share to get there, that would be wonderful. It would make it a lot easier for our students and our faculty that are doing those things to get into other parts of the city.
2 more questions?
Yeah, I was listening with great hope, and I wanted to hear about coordination between bus systems, rail, plane, water access. Is there any plan of trying to coordinate the centers, which are now so scattered, the centers of transportation of all these different types? Bicycles, walking, all of that stuff is fine, but you've got to coordinate the big systems. Is there any plan in Providence to reorganize those major system centers?
There is. As I mentioned, our rail used to be right in the center of downtown at Kennedy Plaza, which was also our bus hub. In the 90s, we moved that when we moved the railroad tracks about a quarter of a mile north in that Capitol Center area. It's still not far, a few minutes of a walk. But we are working with the state to build a new intermodal transit center next to the train station that will coordinate bus service with rail service. That DTC project will also tie our train station to Kennedy Plaza, where there will be some bus service remaining, and to the rest of downtown. So we're actively working on that. The commuter rail has also extended out to TF Green Airport now, so everything is coming together.
If I may pause before the last question, which I believe is right up here, if I could invite the rest of our panelists to please come and take a seat, and we'll have the final question for Providence.
I was happy to hear about your bike share plan, but you didn't say anything about infrastructures that will go with that. Are you planning to have bike lanes or protected bike ways, as what your colleagues just were telling us about? Because if you don't have it, very few people are going to use it and take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And I'm happy to say that the city is investing more than $10 million in high-quality bike infrastructure over the next few years. Along with these other projects, we realize protected bike lanes are incredibly important, so that is where we are investing our money. We're also participating in People for Bike's Big Jump program. We're one of 10 U.S. cities that have committed to tripling the amount of bike ridership in our city, and infrastructure is a huge part of that. So we're actively working on that. Appreciate the importance of it.
So we know a lot of students are bringing bikes to campus or buying bikes once they get to Brown. So we know there's a lot of interest already. They're using those bikes in neighborhoods without any infrastructure, without any sharrows or fake bike lanes, as I call them. So we know there's interest. We just got to make sure, I think the challenge we have is to make sure there's a price point where students can access that bike share program.
Join me in thanking Providence. I did want to quote one question about the maintenance and operations regarding our bike lanes and infrastructure. It's going to be something for Providence and for Minneapolis. There's a gentleman in town, the father of the 21st century bike movement here, Matthew Feiner, who says, "No such thing as bad weather, only bad outfit choices." So talk to me about your iterative plans here. You had mentioned in Minneapolis the ability to build bike lanes before you could clear them, and in Providence in rapidly reevaluating your projects from a streetcar to a bus system. Can you talk about the iterative planning process that goes on in project and program delivery? Minneapolis first.
Sure, I guess I'll start. In Minneapolis, at least the sequencing of our bike infrastructure and the maintenance planning, admittedly, we did kind of get the cart before the horse. And that was because with, I would say, any new idea, if you're going to try and solve every issue that's going to hold that up, you're never going to get it on the ground. So our very first delineator protected bike lane that was installed, we knew we were kind of hearing rumors that our maintenance staff were not huge fans of it, or they didn't have the equipment to maintain it. We actually just we went ahead and installed it. Once it was installed, we went out there with our staff and they figured out ways, or the equipment that they needed to tackle that. So you got to get something out on the ground, and then talk through the issues. Otherwise, you're just going to be held up theorizing about all the end of the world that's going to be created with the new designs.
Yeah, and I would echo that sentiment. If we stopped every time we heard an excuse as to why we shouldn't do something, whether it's a protected bike lane or other huge investment, we would never get started. So sometimes you just kind of need to plow ahead and hope that you'll figure those things out. So, we'll keep you posted how it goes.
I think we also heard from our transit partners, or our transit cities here, regarding funding and sustainability issues, regarding financial sustainability. I think we have a university system that runs a public system and a public system that gets funding from a university system. Can the two of you, being both public universities, talk through how you negotiate your financial sustainability with your partnerships?
On the City of Davis side, Brian can fill in, but City of Davis says, "Here's your money," and then we gladly take it. So they get state and federal formula funds and say, "Here you go, Unitrans, please operate our system for you." I think the interesting thing for us is that a lot of the systems have the university itself pays for the system via parking fees and other things. UC Davis provides zero funding for Unitrans. The students, like I said, tax themselves $11 a month. That $11 is specified for Unitrans. The university itself provides zero funding. So right now what we're doing with the city and the student body is saying, "Hey, university, we got this great partnership. Why don't you join us you get a huge benefit. We carry a third of your students to the university every day. We also, that mitigates the need for more parking. Why don't you come to this partnership? And with the new chancellor that started just a couple months ago, that's where we're going, is first going to the university itself to fund the deficit.
The University of Wisconsin has, I think, a fairly simple relationship now with City Madison Metro, and I think that we don't have a lot of tension and so on about exactly what we're going to do. But on the other hand, we've had problems in the past, and it's actually a pretty complex situation because the students have a segregated fee, which they use to fund their part of the bus pass program, and then we use our parking fees. And then we put them together, and then the University of Wisconsin Transportation Services is sort of the general partner that then goes and works with the Metro to come up with a way to fund and how much it's going to be. But the students themselves, for instance, reduced the amount of money they were willing to give towards the bus system. And as a consequence, for instance, we then had to come up with a different route that combined features of the two older routes that were our main daily routes, and we actually had to go down in service, and it changed the way we did our funding negotiations. And so it's not necessarily been easy all the time, and you can respond further than that.
I would just add that when I mentioned earlier about our ridership being in the top 20 for urban areas over 200,000, in that top 20 list, we are the only city-owned transit system. All the rest are county or district or state or some other regional transit district. So I would say to get to the sustainability issue, one of the reasons we're behind the curve and dealing with capacity is we are competing every year with the police department, the fire department, and so many other important things. We have a beautiful new library in downtown Madison, fantastic, but it's hard to make the pitch for a bus garage, even though we're now using the phrase it will be an advanced all-electric bus facility. That's helping. I still have people ask, but isn't it just a bus garage? So I think from our long-term sustainability standpoint, we're going to have to work with our legislature and be joining the rest of the country and having the ability to form regional transit authorities.
Staying with the two cities nearest me for a moment, we heard from Davis, who built a bike lane in the 60s, and from Minneapolis, who built a bike lane in the 70s. And also from Davis, a decision a long time ago, 50 years ago, to shut down the center of their campus to cars. My question would be, you all are all major traffic generators. And if you guys don't know what that is, it is a large volume of cars coming, or in traffic engineering, a large volume of cars coming from a place. How did you have the conversation as a community about prioritizing non-vehicular transportation? And how did you go about making sure that equity was at the forefront or involved in your conversations?
Well, the university made the decision back in the 1950s, I think, the chancellor at that time had traveled to Europe and wanted to sort of emulate a lot of the bicycling infrastructure that he had seen in Europe. And so he was able to make the arbitrary decision to close campus to vehicles. And that had a huge influence, I think, on how much bicycling we see in Davis today and on campus. And if I understand the history correctly, was that because so much of the community was tied to the university in one way or another, it really was anybody who was on campus was also a community member at that time. They lived and worked in town. And so there was this sort of coalescence of ideas to try to improve the infrastructure from the city onto campus as well. So it started off that way, and then as we've continued to try to advance and innovate with new infrastructure facilities. We were the first to, we invented the bicycle signal head that you see in a lot of other communities now. So it just sort of started that way, and then the culture just kind of builds on itself so that it is now just kind of who we are, and it's what we do. And so we don't really have to do a whole lot of convincing. If anything, we have to tell our community that we kind of need to scale back some of the street designs because we can't always afford what our community wants us to build.
So hopefully that was not too long-winded.
The university, I think, has always been kind of forced to get interested in bike infrastructure and transit because we didn't have the space to provide parking, for instance. And that really is important. If you really manage the parking, then people will choose the other alternative because they've got to get there. But the other thing we've done is that in 2005, we started our master plan process that was much better, as Mayor Soglin talked about. But we also have as part of that a long-range transportation plan, and that really was just a TDM plan, a transportation demand management plan, because every aspect about that long-range transportation plan dealt with providing ways to make alternatives work better. So basically we made decisions, for instance, that every time we went and reconstructed a street or made any decision about a street, it was going to have bike lanes on it and or it was going to have bus pullouts so that we can, in fact, make sure that those alternatives worked well. And we reconnected some streets that weren't connected in the past, which then allowed bikes to get through and actually buses to make a better route on the western part of the campus. And we've basically made a decision that we are going to go after this in a very methodical way. And before that, it was kind of hit or miss. Somebody would have an idea, and there was a general interest. But now our transportation plan is very systematic about requiring us to do this every time we have an opportunity.
My final question, so if you can get your questions ready. For Providence and Minneapolis, both of you are rapidly evolving in your planning. You've had 3 attempts in Minneapolis, and this is your second attempt on the busway. How does your data-driven approach facilitate your planning process with your community, and where do your university partner communities fall in there?
I think we're in Providence and across the country, we're seeing a clear demand for multimodal transportation, and that's driving the way that we're investing in our city. As we see companies looking, look at Amazon, and it's very specific what they're looking for. And there are reasons that companies like GE are heading up to Boston. There's a clear data-driven demand for better multimodal infrastructure, and so a lot of what we're doing is trying to address that. Also looking at transit ridership in general, across the country, you do see that generally increasing. And, as you look and see people moving to cities, that's also, I think, another great data point and great indicator that, that we're on the right path.
How's the university? Yep.
So I think the downtown transit connector and the stops that the city's put together are the right stops. I think it's been a really well-informed participatory process. It hasn't had as much data as I think we probably could use, and I wish that we had taken an opportunity to put in some sensors a year ago in that connector to evaluate pedestrian, bicycle, vehicular traffic, and then leave those sensors in place for the next 10 years and see what changes. That would have been a great opportunity. That said, we are working with some of Martina's colleagues on identifying what, smart city opportunity projects. So putting some sensors in place that would give us some data. The street lights is the one I think other cities are using. And that's a fascinating opportunity that I think everybody should take advantage of.
Absolutely. In Minneapolis, how has your RFID been tied back into your planning and project delivery approach?
We're just starting to do that. It was primarily, the reason we started it was to tie bike commuting to healthcare. And we thought that was really important, and we really wanted to make that connection because we felt that once that connection was made, we could really, that would be a very fruitful avenue to explore. And it took years for us to get our insurance people and our wellness people, because I would go to them every year and say, hey, how come we're not paying people, how come people don't earn anything for biking to work? People are complaining to me all the time, well, they pay for gym memberships, but I don't go to the gym. I ride my bike to work. So I kind of hear this year after year, and it was always the same answer. Well, we're not going to do anything on the honor system, period. Just forget it. So we came up with this RFID idea, and it worked. And now we're starting to really get into more of the data, and we're doing some interesting studies. We've done a lot of weather-related studies. We've done some. We just finished a study to see why women commute less during the winter than men. And we get a lot of anecdotal evidence about that. It's just because of the diminished daylight. And it could be dark in the morning, and it's personal safety related. So we did a 3-year, we crunched the data for 3 years worth of putting the solar data, all the weather data, snow depth, and the temperature, and all that together. And unfortunately, we couldn't tease out the daylight faction because it's so closely tied to the cold and the snow. But those are the sorts of things that we're doing now. And like I said, we're trying to get actual counts at these stations versus the kind of the virtual counts that we're getting through the RFID. And I think that will be very helpful for us in future planning endeavors.
From the audience.
Hi there, inspiring stuff. And as we think about this as a move to sustainability, getting transport off oil, and then also this sort of financial strain that you all seem to be facing, this shift to electric bus fleets, all electric, it seems like you've got a new customer there with a massive new energy opportunity in the utility. Now, it's touched on a little bit with Madison. So I was just wondering, have anyone else thought about, or do they have a friendly utility that could be this massive new customer of new electrons, where the oil companies are going to go the other way? There's some interesting financing models that you might be touching on as well, Clean Energy Works and others. And then I was also thinking, can you coordinate with your high school, elementary, middle school bus fleets to create a massive new customer as you take your bus fleets electric?
I'll just recognize that in addition to our utility helping as a major financial partner in this recent Tiger grant, we were also awarded a low-no grant for 3 buses that are coming in next year. And that was our first time to sit down with the utility, and transit systems are able to bring on a consultant for free. That was helpful for me as an operator. Since I don't understand a lot of the details, the consultant served as a communication bridge between me and the utility and explained how we could do that. So I would say that was a very important thing.
Dr. Buss? One more question from the audience?
To add to this last question, I think one might think in terms of private-public partnerships beyond just utilities, particularly when we invoke the word existential, as Jeff mentioned, with the increase in labor cost. What prevents the transit system from working with the private sector at large for funding and for other reasons, including smart city concepts, so on and so forth?
Let me start by just reminding everyone that the transit system used to be run by the private sector until the bankruptcies of the mid-20th century. How about Davis? Do you want to start on, what you've reached a cap on taxing of your students, of self-tax. What are your options left you're thinking through for P3?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the way to go is to find employers that are willing to buy bus passes from you. Our largest employer is UC Davis, but unfortunately, we don't really have that many staff, as you saw from the graph, taking the bus system. They see it as a student service. So one thing that me and Brian work a lot on and have to move towards is how do we attract people onto the bus who aren't students to get it away from, oh, that's a student service. For the university pitch, to get the university to pitch in money to fund Unitrans directly, we want to offer free bus passes to every staff member. So that would help get more riders onto the system, hopefully increase the mode share for transit of the faculty and staff, and then give us more money to fund the service. So yeah, we're going to our largest employer, who is us, to fund the deficit right now. In Davis, unfortunately, though, there's just not a lot of large employers to go to, and transit's just not a profitable industry at this time.
We heard a mention of P3 and Smart City Work, streetlights was mentioned. A lot of bike share systems are now Smart Bike and constantly collecting data from their users to help feed into usually in a private-public partnership. Martina, can you describe the system you're launching in Providence and how you plan on working with a vendor to deliver the mobility option?
Yeah, so we're planning to work with Social Bicycles, and they have over 30 systems throughout the country right now, and they're really, ahead of the traditional bike share systems that you see. They're one of those traditional providers, but they're really on the edge of pioneering new semi-dockless technology. And this is an instance where they're essentially we're contributing to it, and partners like Brown will likely be contributing, but it's largely a privately run entity. We tried to stay away from some of the entirely privately run bike share systems that are sort of new and popular now. You see them in China, and they're coming to the U.S. now. We wanted to have more of a partnership with our bike share provider and have some control over what took place there. But I think without it being privately run, we wouldn't be able to do it. We were looking at a streetcar system. We were also looking at potentially running that system privately. And now, of course, that it's a bus-based system, we'll be working with our state transit agency. But those private partnerships are absolutely essential, and I think you'll see that happening more and more as the years go on.
And I'll just add that in the Sacramento region, our bike share program is also with Social Bicycles, and we have a business model that's generally self-sustaining. And then you're also starting to see in the Sacramento region some of our transit agencies starting to partner with transportation network companies to help with to and from last mile access to their light rail stations. That's Sacramento Regional Transit. So we are starting to see more of that public-private partnership sort of in those spaces. And those haven't typically occurred historically.
Wrap it up.
Yep, just a couple quick things on the private partnership that are new compared to 20 years ago. 20 years ago, if I would have asked a private sector partner to participate, their answer would be, I contribute taxes. Today, I hear our private sector partners talk about their cost of parking. So for the university located on the Isthmus, the cost of parking is very expensive. So we now have that data to show them what their cost of parking is. That's one issue. I think our communities and all of our communities are also sensitive to equity. And so there's awareness in communities like ours, where a community of colors and lower income individuals actually live on the periphery, that if we're going to address getting workers to job in a regional way, we need the private sector to help us to accomplish that, either by getting a regional transit authority legislation so they hear not just from the transit manager, but from the private sector person as well. And then we work with those plants to get people to jobs from those areas more efficiently. So I think there's more opportunities for private-public partnerships.
Thank you so much. And I'm just going to wrap up by thanking our panelists, and again, thanking the Yale Center, Yale Hixon Center for having us here today. Can we get a round of applause? Thank you. One housekeeping announcement. It is now 12:19. We are 4 minutes behind schedule. Please come back to this area at 1:15 after lunch. Thank you.